Hello, hello. So it looks like there is a couple of people already here. I always do like to wait just a minute or two as people are trickling in. But for the folks who are here, I'd love to know where you guys are coming in from. Could you drop in the chat where you're calling from? Seattle. Very nice. Ooh, Fontana. I was down there last year, checking out some warehouses. Chino, Orange County, Las Vegas. Hey, we got a lot of California, which makes sense. Santa Maria. Great. And then would love to know, just starting off at the top, is there anything that you are hoping to get out of this session? Would love if you could add that into the chat as well, just so that we can make sure that the information that we're delivering during this webinar hits the mark for you. Ooh, Rick from NYC, yes. Knicks are having a heyday. Looks like some people are typing. So first coming in, how to avoid violations when we have to test fleets 4 times a year next year is absolutely something that we will address and something to be very aware of. And as it looks like there's a couple more comments coming in, but we are a couple minutes after, so I think we can get started. I'm Hannah Storrs. I am the Senior Manager of Content here at Zonar, and I'm going to be your host today. Um, we put together this session for fleet managers and compliance leads who are operating or planning to operate in California. The Clean Truck Check enforcement is live and running at scale. And we want to make sure that you leave today with a clear picture of where things stand and where your next move is. And as Kenneth is putting in the comments, what they're looking for is a bulleted item to-do list of requirements for companies like ours that are not transport companies, power line constructor whose vehicles have been pulled into these requirements. So that's a great call out. Uh, I do want to, before we start the session, there's a couple of housekeeping stuff that I want to get into. One of the things is we are going to be actively monitoring the comment section. Love having a discussion and hearing what you guys are thinking as the webinar goes through. But we also have a dedicated Q&A. We will be running a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so please put your questions there. If something comes up timely within the webinar, we'll try to address, but we do want to hold the questions to the end so we can really give it some dedicated time. Now, with that said, let me introduce you to the people who are going to take you through this. Rochelle, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yes, Rochelle Trindad. I am the CMO here at Zonar. While I'm relatively new to Zonar, I have been in the industry for quite some time. I've spent more than 15 years across transportation management and supply chain management. And so really excited to talk to you about this today. I know that this is a hot topic for a lot of organizations, both based in California or that operate through California as well. So really nice to speak with you today.
Right, and Tehan?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name's Tehan Jantz, and I am a product marketer at Zonar. I've been at the company for over 9 years now. Was part of our initial launch of Emissions Check, which was our solution for the CARB Clean Truck Check solution a couple of years ago. Worked on it from the very beginning. I have a support background, so it was something we really wanted to help, in our partnership with CARB, solve for customers, for our customers, and be a good compliance educator and asset to the customers that we serve. And Yeah, really excited to be here to dive in and cover CARB Clean Truck Check, the impacts, and what we can do to help.
Great. Okay, I think let's get right into it. Rochelle, you're gonna start us off, I think.
Absolutely. So, before we get started, I know we probably have people of varying knowledge as it relates to the CARB Clean Truck Check. So, we're going to start with just a few acronyms that you'll probably hear us using throughout the conversation. Of course, CARB, California Air Resources Board, Clean Truck Check, which you'll hear us refer to as the CTC. You'll also see CTC BIS, which is the Clean Truck Check vehicle inspection system. And you'll also hear us talk about PEAKS, which is the Portable Emissions Acquisition System also. So from that standpoint, we might layer in some of those acronyms into the conversation. So just wanted to level set us before we get started. So just to give an overview of what the Clean Truck Check is at a glance, it applies to nearly all diesel and alternative fuel duty vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating over 14,000 pounds that operate on California public roads and highways, even if they're not registered in California. So even if you're in Arizona, Nevada, you come into the state, this will include you. This includes almost all vehicle types, non-gasoline engine, or non, this includes public vehicles, so federal, state, local government. It includes motor coaches, transit, shuttles, school buses, hybrid vehicles, you name it, it's included in there. And the two things that people tend to miss is out-of-state trucks are in scope the moment they run into the California, and deadlines are on a per vehicle, not fleet-wide. So what the Clean Truck Check requires of you is that you, one, register your vehicle, two, you pay the $32 annual compliance fee per vehicle as well, and then three, you test your vehicle on the assigned schedule. Now, this started back in January of 2025. We are going to see an increase in the requirements. So in January 2025, there was a requirement to do this 2 times per year. It is based on your VIN number, which month your check is due. When we move to October 2027, it's going to increase to 4 times a year that you have to do this check as well. So this is going to get a lot busier for people. We know a lot of people are looking to understand how they can make compliance easier for their vehicles. So really excited to talk to you about this today and how you can look at continuous compliance versus episodic compliance. So let's jump into what did this used to look like before? And really, most people were used to the traditional smog checks. It was a one-time certification they had to do. It was localized. It was infrequent. You could easily bypass any additional work between checks. But now the Clean Truck Check today, this is going to be continuous compliance. We just talked about how there's emissions monitoring that's happening. So in addition to your 2 checks that you have to do this year, 4 checks that you'll have to do starting in October 2027, you are going to have to be prepared to potentially get notification to test as well based on any emissions testing or if they happen to identify that you're driving a vehicle that it has high emissions. So this means you have to have continuous emissions monitoring. This is going to catch some of that aging hardware and any tampering that might happen. And this is going to track these interstate trucks dynamically. So once again, if you're in a neighboring state, you drive through California regularly, this will apply to you. So this is all about shifting from episodic to that continuous monitoring. So there are some heavy fines that come with this. So I'm going to pass it over to Tehan to talk a little bit about some of the penalties here.
Thanks, Rochelle. Yeah, so setting this up, there's really 2 costs that are the biggest impact for fleets here. And, one on the left, there's the cost of the fines, right? That's the upfront, operating out of compliance. The law allows civil penalties to be included in this as well, right? So if there's tampering or illegal modifying of emissions equipment, those ceilings can climb higher, right? Up to $37,000 or more. But generally, $1,000 to $10,000 in fines per day that can really stack up. And it's not theoretical. CARB, we're about to share a lot of numbers that CARB have publicly shared. And the whole point of this is not to, spread fear or anything about fines and costs. This is just to be informative that this is real, this is in place, this is something that's starting to get enforced. And so I think CARB has assessed roughly, $535,000 in penalties, across, 7,000 clean truck check enforcement actions already. And this is just the upfront bill that everyone is, fleets are going to start facing and interacting with. However, the second one on the right is what we really want to talk about and focus on, and that's really the estimates and the costs of having a vehicle that's out of service. And so if it gets to that stage where there's a DMV registration hold or a truck is unable to operate, industry estimates that's $500 to $1,000 a day. It can vary depending on your operation. And I just want people to understand. I mean, we everyone here on this call can think about, what impact that can have on you, right? What does a parked vehicle that's not able to operate to participate in your operations? You're still paying insurance. You might still be paying for a driver that's now earning nothing based on that. So that's where there's like a point that really there's a lot of pain there for a lot of fleets that customers were worried about with the DMV registration holds. You can't renew it. This is an underlying problem that can really impact access, and this can happen if your vehicle's out of service and it shows up at a port, a rail yard or job site, depending on where your operations are most common. That could just be enforced on the day of, and you could be denied access because CARB are going to go ahead and monitor which vehicles are registered, which vehicles are out of compliance, send that information over the ports, over to representatives at these high traffic locations across the state, and they're going to check. And when they check, the only way to get out of that is to go ahead and log into the CARB portal, register your asset, pay your compliance fee, and then wait. There's some exceptions with, getting 5-day passes that you then have to apply for, but it's all a downtime risk. It's all a, very involved process that can really cost you. So just want to call that out as, the biggest impact from this enforcement. The other thing is the reality of this enforcement and how it's going. So these are some publicly reported numbers from CARB. And, one common mistake I've been seeing, especially with the early days of enforcement that started in January 2025, was a lot of fleets saying, I'm going to wait and see. I'm still, getting up to speed with things. And I think CARB, to their credit, really took fleet education very seriously. There's a lot of webinars. We partnered with a lot of providers to try and do education out at trade shows, out at events, to really try to get the education up there so that fleets understood what this was about, why this was different from the previous old smog checks and all of that. And because of that, I think there was a grace period. There was a ramp up period. And we put these numbers out there because these are publicly reported numbers from CARB that now show that grace period is kind of coming to a close and enforcement is starting to take hold. And so currently, over 750,000 vehicles tracked in the CARB CTC portal, actively screened 278,000 vehicles in 2025 alone. And those numbers are going to keep increasing this year. And so the system's no longer, just testing the waters. This is very much in place. The big number I want everyone to pay attention to is that 20,777 number, right? Those are vehicles registered that have fees unpaid. And so the big call out there is, those are fleets, those are examples of fleets that took this seriously. They have registered their vehicles in CARB, but there's an administrative step. There's some sort of gap where you need to go in, you need to pay your compliance fee. Some of these can be month to month, right? Depending on when the vehicle's renewal is. So really need to stay on top of it. It's an administrative risk. It's not punishing fleets that are bad actors or anything. It's just punishing a fleet that might be busy. And that's where, having a partner, having someone that can help with a big part of that can really help. So one other thing I want to talk about real quick is the escalation funnel. And so this is where, there's the shift from, a warning, and that's how many warnings were issued by CARB, to a penalty, to then that registration hold. And that's really where, there's holes where, the vehicle gets that downtime and all those associations where there's a risk to the operation. Every step here is harder to climb back out of, right? So the number that I want to really call out is in that inside line, right? Those are the 1,240 vehicles that were registered after they received a formal notice. So that's a perfect example of a vehicle that showed up, that was pulled over, part of an inspection or something that, went ahead and triggered an immediate penalty that required registration of that asset to go ahead and gain compliance and active status. We don't want our customers to get to that point where you're being reactive and you're having to face restriction of your operation before you go ahead and register and get ahead of this. So we really, really want to push customers and people and fleets we work with to go ahead and be proactive about this, get ahead of it. It's not difficult when you are being proactive and you're getting ahead of it. The challenges really start to take a hold when, people are being reactive or you ignore it, and before it starts to become a real problem, and then a logistical nightmare follows. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Rochelle to talk about how this enforcement really reaches you.
Yes, so you're probably wondering, this started back in 2025. Enforcement is still escalating at this point in time. There are really 3 tiers of enforcement right now. And the first one is the one that you're probably most familiar with. That's really kind of that back office administrative component with automatic DMV registration holds. We're going to go into each of these a little bit more in the following slides. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview here. The second is really that remote roadside monitoring. So the remote sensing, the license plate recognition that automatically flags high emitters and then triggers a notice to submit to testing also. So when I mentioned before, you have your mandatory 2 tests that you have to do right now, and it will go up to 4 in 2027. You can also receive a notice to submit to testing as well. The third tier of escalation is when you're actually getting those citations, the fines, the impounds, and then denial of access to ports, rail yards, job sites. This is the one that I think a lot of companies are really, really nervous about. So you have to keep in compliance to make sure that not only can your vehicles be on the road, but that they can actually do the jobs that they were intended to do. So with that, let's talk a little bit about kind of this first tier, which is what you're probably a little bit more used to. This is kind of what we call the administrative chokehold. There are really 3 conditions that flip a flag in the Clean Truck Check vehicle inspection system. That's the first, is that you don't have a passing test on file, and so that will trigger. The second is if you didn't pay those compliance fees, so those $32 a year that you have to pay for every vehicle, or third, if you missed a testing date. So most of the time, the testing date is determined based on your VIN number. You typically have 90 days prior to that testing date to get it completed and get it in the system. So you want to do it as early as possible to make sure if there are any issues, you have the opportunity to fix those prior to that required testing date. So if any of these three flags get triggered inside the vehicle inspection system, what happens is your registration gets blocked. So you can't renew your vehicle. If you don't have a registered vehicle, you have even more significant fines that you'd have to pay there if you try to operate that vehicle. So this is really what stops what you have to do to ensure that you're maintaining compliance so that you can keep your vehicles in good status in California. So with that, this is kind of the first layer. I'm going to pass it to Tehan to talk about the next couple layers.
Yeah, and so this is where deployments, the risks, the vehicles getting screened, the citations all come into play here. Rochelle talked a little bit about the sensors. So those peak sensors that were on the roadways before Clean Truck Check even came into enforcement. This was how CARB really monitored vehicles emissions and determined if this was needed, right? Before the Senate bill was put into place, before all of that, you had these sensors on the road, very unintrusive. The truck would just drive under them, detect the smoke coming out of the exhaust, and then determine, what was a dirty vehicle and what was not. And so with those mobile deployments that were already in place, they screened more than 46,000 vehicles. And all those citations got citations that were issued, all the recording that was done was all automated. It didn't require a person or a roadside inspector to go ahead and collect that. So there was a lot of data that was put into place. CARB have a very, very strong mission, right, of maintaining clean air within the state of California. And to their credit, they're really leading the charge in the nation to go ahead and achieve that, right? And they're really setting a tone that a lot of other states are actually looking to follow further down the line and are monitoring this whole system and seeing how it's doing. So effectively, the reason for this slide is to really call out that, this was an automated thing. This is something that is still going to continue. So while there's manual checks that happen at roadside, happen at, the ports and all that. And you want to maintain compliance, just know that, your vehicle entering the state, as Rochelle just talked about, being tied to the VIN, even if you're registered outside of the state, you cross that border, you have to maintain compliance with CARB. You have to be thinking about this. These sensors exist. They're collecting your data off of your vehicle just to make sure things are operating appropriately. And, you need to be meeting a certain standard to qualify to be operating on California roads. And that's a case that we're all going to have to get used to. So with that, let's look at, the areas that CARB is looking at the most. So that's really places where, there's a lot of activity and there's a lot of traffic. So 58% of last year's inspections, out of more than 21,000 that happened in overburdened communities. And that's no coincidence, right? These are the highest trafficked areas. This is where air quality is extremely important. And so CARB directs its air enforcement towards those communities on purpose, right? It's really a matter of, protecting the environment, making sure that, these high traffic areas are not being neglected. So if your vehicles or if you operate near ports, rail yards, heavy industrial corridors, like we've talked about, it's not just an average risk, right? There's a higher chance that, your vehicle is going to be monitored. There's going to be more checks. CARB runs joint operations with local agencies, places like landfills and oil and gas sites, and there's more scrutiny around those compounds. And so, if you see a corridor that you operate in here on the map, that's more in line with your operations and where your vehicles travel the most, then that's a clear call out in a place where you're going to have to really make sure that things are registered and things are working well. The other really, really important thing I'd like to call out is, and we had this assumption very early on with a lot of fleets where my vehicle's good. I maintain compliance. I don't try to cheat the system. I make sure everything's operating great. I'm good, right? I'm not worried about this. There's not going to be any issues. and my vehicle is the mechanical health of my vehicle is very strong. So for those fleet managers that believe that, and were confident in compliance, that was a bit of a trap because very early on, um, there were other reasons for failure, right? So your engine can be fault flawless, your record can still be broken in three ways, right? So one is, if there's onboard diagnostics flags, there are latent faults that don't really present themselves on the vehicle. There's not really a check engine light, but there is something on there on the vehicle that might show up on the back end, right? CARB look at a long list of extensive data when those scans come in and review that. It's not visible to the providers. It's not visible to the fleets or the mechanics or technicians. So the truck can pass a real test, but there can also be no valid record of it in the database, right? This is where it's really important. Got to match the VINs up. CARB really track the VINs, right? When they coordinate with representatives at in compliance offices, they're sharing VINs. VINs are what everyone's checking. That's the ID for that vehicle. And then, everything can be logged correctly, but maybe the annual fee was unpaid, right? We talked about those violations where, that administrative risk. So just want to call that out that mechanical health isn't the only thing. There's other reasons to fail. And a big thing that we will keep harping on here is this is why it's really, really important to be proactive about this. Those 90-day compliance windows that Rochelle talked about, having the scans done early in that period is so critical because it gives you that buffer zone to go ahead and correct issues. If you're reactive, let's say January 1st is my compliance deadline, I'm gonna, I'm on vacation over Christmas. I go January 1st on New Year's Day to do my scan. Whoops, something failed. And now I'm out of compliance the very next day. Whereas my compliance window opened, let's say January 1st, 2027 was my compliance deadline. My compliance window opened on October 1st, 2026. So that's a 90-day period where, I could have done something about it and I could have been proactive, but I wasn't. And so now I'm pushed up against a deadline. So just want to call that out. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Rochelle to talk about the big change that's happening that really could be a logistical headache for fleets.
So I mentioned this before, but testing is going to double in October of 2027. So the last 2 years, as this has been rolling out, it's 2 times per year. Right now, if you have 200 trucks, that's 400 tests a year that you have to do. That's going to double to 800 in 2027. Anecdotally, I was talking to a transportation manager probably a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about this specifically. And he was saying by doing some of the manual checks, they were spending almost $200 per check for this. And so they were looking at how do they actually reduce their overall cost? Were they going to need to get their own credentialed testers, things like that? Because currently, 400 tests per year at $200, that's $80,000 that a fleet might have to pay to manage this testing. There are much better solutions. We'll definitely talk about that. But you can see that not only are the fines pretty steep, but to actually manage this, it could be very steep for your organization if you don't do some sort of continuous monitoring. So there are really a couple ways to do this. Actually, if we can stay on the prior slide, there are really a few ways to do this. And I'm going to steal a little bit of Tehan's thunder because he's going to talk about more of the technical component of this. But there are really 4 ways to do this right now. There's a manual OBD test. So if you have a credentialed tester, non-connected device, most of these tests are going to take anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes per vehicle. Now, there's also, if you have a pre-2013 vehicle, there's an opacity or a smoke test that you have to do. And each of these tests is going to take about 20 minutes per vehicle, though it does require some more physical inspection steps than the OBD scan. Then if you actually go and do full inspection at a testing facility, on average, those full inspections are going to last anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, depending upon the vehicle readiness, the equipment availability, the testing facility efficiency, etc. And then finally, there's the continuously connected telematics device. And so the data collection process pretty much just happens in the background as you are using that vehicle, which makes it something so that you don't ever have to take that vehicle off the road. And that information is just being transmitted in the background. So the gap between the manual methods, which we know take 15 to 60 minutes, but realistically speaking, by the time you take that vehicle to whatever place you are going to do the inspection and you factor in travel time, potentially wait at a facility, you're probably really looking at closer to 1 to 3 hours that your vehicle is out of service for that. You compare that to something like a continuously connected telematics device that's providing this information. And especially when we increase up to 4 checks per year, it makes a material difference both from a cost perspective and from a time perspective for your team. So with that, with this increase, we're going to see the escalating penalties. We mentioned before, just very, very briefly, that there have already been fines over $500,000. We've also talked about how this enforcement is escalating. We know that per infraction, you might have to pay up to $43,000 for some of these infractions for civil penalties. We also know that you might get DMV registration holds. You might not be able to access ports, rail yards, things like that. So it is incredibly important that you comply and that you find the opportunities to make this work for your fleet in an unobtrusive way, of course. So I'm going to pass it back to Tehan so he can talk to you a little bit more about some of the questions that people have about this.
Yeah, this touches on something I heard a lot early on, which was, with the current administration, is there going to be changes? Is there going to be revocation of some of these rules? And the truth is that we have to just look at what actually happened, right? So back, at the start of this year, the EPA did issue like partial disapproval of how, California credits out-of-state trucks for their federal air quality planning rules, but that was very, very narrow disapproval, and we have to really focus on what that actually touched. There were some other regulations under the CARB umbrella. CARB do a lot, and there are regulations that affect things at a national level and at a federal level that the EPA did strike down. Something like, I think it was like advanced clean fleets and stuff where you had to convert your whole fleet to electric. Those stuff like that got pushed. However, as it pertains to clean truck check, um, the the disapproval from the EPA earlier this year really only counted towards emissions reductions from the out-of-state trucks. It did not touch anything related to what Clean Truck Check enforced. And so the short answer is that this is not a greenhouse gas rule or anything. Clean Truck Check targets particulate matter, and alone, and so therefore, it does not require an EPA waiver to operate. And so CARB can get enforced regardless. It's a state regulation. There's a lot of backing from the state government as well as governor and all of that. So there's really no oversight from the EPA regarding this, and so it's something that I strongly urge constant conversations with customers and fleets that talk about this. This is not something that's going away, and this is not something that's going to get touched. California has every right to enforce this regulation over their highways, and it's a very simple targeted regulation that really has not much to do with EPA oversight. So with that, we're going to talk about the 3 ways to meet the compliance, right? And so obviously, we have our method as a telematics service provider, but we want this webinar to be educational. We want to share for fleets out there who are already dealing with this to know the full scope of what their options are. And CARB have made it easy, right? They've made it as easy as possible to give multiple methods of ways that fleets can stay compliant. So one's the third-party testing, right? So Rochelle's already touched on this and some of the costs associated with it. But yeah, there's plenty of shops all over the state that will run the scans for you. And you could just take your vehicle there. And for a lot of our customers in fleets that have a few vehicles, 0 to 30 maybe, might be pushing it a little bit, but they generally rely on this method of I can take my vehicle in, I can do with, the downtime, I can try to line it up with some other kind of maintenance I might have to do and get the scan done from a credentialed tester in a site. And then, pay something like $150, $200 a scan to go ahead and execute on that. The other option is the in-shop tool. And so we've had customers that, have bought this very early on, especially even Zonar customers, bought this tool and said, hey, as long as it's, twice a year, I have a technician on site. A lot of school districts or utility companies, my vehicles come back to the same place every day. I have a mechanic. I can become a credential tester, right? Anyone can become a credential tester with CARB. Get this tool and learn how to do the scans and submit the scans. That's how easy CARB have made it. So this is an option for fleets to go ahead and do that. They spend a few minutes on it. They handle the compliance fee, the CTC portal side of it, and then go ahead and do the scans themselves manually. But, still involves plugging into a vehicle and actually doing the scan physically, manually, very manual process. And then there's option 3, which is where, CARB really partnered with telematics service providers to go ahead and provide a continuously connected solution. And that's where we really come in. And the big advantage for this is obviously those large fleets. Number one, they don't have time to logistically deal with a month to month. Every single vehicle I own has a different deadline, different registration dates, different VINs. I don't have time to figure this out. A lot of over the road fleets, right? I don't know where my truck is going to be. Is it going to be near a site that I can go ahead and, do a scan at? Is it going to be near a shop? Even if I have technicians on my payroll, can I get them to the vehicle to go ahead and plug in and actually do the scan with the shop tool? So that logistical headache is where a telematics service provider can really provide value, right? I already have a box in my vehicle. I'm already using Zonar for fleet tracking, all my other services. Wow, you can turn this on for me over the air. I don't need to change anything. I don't need to install anything. I don't need to pull anything out. Great. And so that's where, us and a few select competitors really partnered closely with CARB to go ahead and make this a reality. And we were the first to do this. We were really proactive about it. We wanted to get ahead of it. We saw the problem coming well in advance of this even shifting to 4 years. And we actually could support every vehicle, every protocol. And we're actually the only provider in the country that can support a hardwired OEM install as well. So we're really looking to, go that extra mile, really make sure that all our customers' needs are met, because we have fleets that are complicated, that have a variety of vehicles that require different installs, that sometimes don't want their OBD port used up. CARB is very, very strict about tampering with the OBD port, what's plugged in there. It has to be a direct connection. A lot different vehicle protocols. You got to submit different certification requirements to meet those standards. So with that, we've taken all that very seriously and tried to meet all those demands and get our executive orders and certifications in place so we can help customers. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Rochelle to talk about how much further we go than just compliance.
Yeah. And before we go to this, I do want to just reiterate what Tehan was just saying. So last week I was at the Government Fleet Expo. I talked to a gentleman who works for CARB, who was saying They are intentionally trying to educate people about the continuous telematics solutions. They want this to be easy for fleets. They are not trying to make this difficult. They want options that that allow you to not pull your vehicles off the road. They want this to be something that you just build into your everyday program. So they're trying to educate people on these telematics solutions as well, so that people know that there are options besides this very expensive pulling your vehicle off the road, paying $200, trying to find a credentialed person who can complete this. So very important to know there are other ways besides that really difficult process. And as Tehan said, Zonar is obviously one of the partners that can work with you on this. We not only do this compliance, but we do a lot of other things for you. As Tehan said, we were the first telematics service provider to certify to be compliant with CARB emissions testing. And so there are two ways to do that. That is the install that happens of the Zonar V4 after you purchase the vehicle, or if you have something like a Freightliner, a Thomas Built buses, Western Star. If those come from the factory with the Zonar V4 telematics unit already in the vehicle, which a lot of those OEMs already have, you can just flip this on and we are compliant through those OEM installed hardwired installations as well. So first TSP to certify, also the only one that has our OEM installed certified as well. Our platform doesn't just do this. It does your standard GPS fleet tracking. It does ELD and hours of service. You can do electronic inspections, diagnostics, all of your driver safety as well. So this solution actually does a lot more than just your CARB compliance component. And we actually protect more than half of the nation's school buses in terms of our GPS fleet tracking and solutions. So we are always safety led. We are always innovating. We are always trying to make sure that we have the right solutions out there in the market for you so that you can keep your fleet in optimal shape, keep your team and your drivers safe. And so as you're looking for a CARB solution, compliance is just the start with Zonar. So with that, I'll pass it back to Tehan to kind of talk through the technical components of this.
Yeah, and this just high level of how things work, right? So obviously you need to register your vehicles with CARB, pay a compliance fee. Our goal is to then be your partner to take care of everything else. Our V4 telematics box on the vehicle will collect all the live engine data. Required scans get submitted automatically on a schedule. The compliance schedules are automated. Our V4 already knows, based off of the VIN, your registration information, when to go ahead and do those scans. Those results transmit over to CARB over the air. Everything's done automatically. And then the pass, fail, whatever fault results show up in the back end ignition, Zonar ignition portal. So what's missing from this whole process is really you. There's no need to schedule a test. There's no, driving to a center. There's no waits at a counter. There's, no waiting for a result. The work just gets easier, and all of this is taken care of and disappears. So the other thing I want to really call out with the advantage of having your box, your telematics box, and this is because we're already plugged into the vehicle, and so we can listen in to faults. If I can guarantee if there's a check engine light on your vehicle, you're almost definitely going to fail a CARB scan. That being said, we can uncover those faults before compliance windows even open, right? You have diagnostic reporting you can access easily on your portal. You can see that, get ahead of things, stay on top of maintenance, and that just leads into past scans. The other big call out, we talked about being proactive. The V4 on day one of your 90-day compliance window will try to submit a scan within your normal operation of your vehicle. You're starting up your vehicle, you're driving, the V4 submits a scan to CARB day one of the 90-day compliance window. You get a result day one. And then whether you pass or not. If you pass, the V4 just shuts off and continues doing all its other stuff that it needs to do for the rest of our Zonar solutions, and nothing else. If it fails, there's a period of time where the V4 will attempt to try that again. You also have the control to manually initiate scans. Let's say you take it to your shop to get a fault fixed. You can manually scan off of your Zonar portal to get your passing scan whenever you need to. So moment there's a pass, and that's what it's all about, being proactive and getting that pass early on in the process and making this easy for our customers. And so I think with that, we're going to shift to the costs.
So you'll see a QR code on the bottom of your screen. That will actually take you to our CARB website. There's an ROI calculator on there. So you have the ability to determine how much you're currently paying right now versus how much it would cost to actually do a continuous telematics solution. This really is going to give you an assessment. As I mentioned before, if you're doing this manually, you're probably spending 20 to 30 minutes on the test itself, but there's drive time. So you know that you have to cover the driver's wait time, you have to cover the payment associated with it, the downtime for your vehicle, and the cost of the test. So add all of those things in, you'll be able to scan the difference really quickly to identify based on how many vehicles you have, then how frequently the cadence is. So if you want to calculate for today versus October of 2027, when it turns to 4 scans per year, you can calculate that in, and then it'll show you exactly how much it is. This is a relatively inexpensive thing to add from a telematics continuous monitoring standpoint. So usually going to be less than $5 per month for you to add something like this in versus a $200 check every 2 times a year, if not 4 times a year. So from that standpoint, worth exploring the option. We're happy to talk you through it. If you have any questions, whether it's on the ROI calculator or even any questions about CARB itself, we are talking to the team at CARB on a regular basis. So I'm happy to share any insights we have or any tips for you as you plan how you want to maintain compliance. So I know we're running a little bit short on time. I'm going to hand it back to Tehan just to wrap us up a little bit.
Yeah, so quick wrap up here. I mean, this is what this has been all about, right? This 2027 mandates come in, it's going to double the burden, penalties, all those fines. We just want to, give you peace of mind, take that scramble away, have your compliance run in the background. We've been a strong compliance company in the past, so we get it. And we just want to catch problems before, anything becomes a violation. But really want to make one key takeaway clear. This webinar, those last few slides talked a lot about our solution, but this isn't really a sales pitch, right? We want to be a partner. We want to help be an educator. We really enjoy partnering with CARB, and we believe in the mission. We like what they're doing. And so we want to help be part of that education process. So, if you need someone to talk to, not buying a Zonar solution, just reach out to us. We have a long compliance history, and we'd love to just help, point you in the right direction, be an educator, help with any problems you're having, and continue to do some of these webinars, maybe even, help partner with some of CARB's education activities in the future so we can be a part of this, because that's what this is really about. And we just want to be helpful and be a partner. And so reach out if you have any questions, and you have questions now. Hopefully we have a little time to take some of them and answer them, but that's what we're here for. We're here to help.
Great. Thank you guys so much. This was very informative. We do have a couple of questions, and I know we're running low on time, so I'm going to throw them out really quick. The first is from Alexandra. Most of our trucks are registered in Arizona and Nevada and just pass through California a few times a month. What actually triggers coverage? A single trip, a number of days, miles driven in state? What's the line?
I'm happy to jump in and take this one, Tehan. So the trigger is really any operation on a California public road, full stop. Doesn't matter the number of times, doesn't matter the number of days. There's one small tiny carve out, which is there's a limited 5-day pass through exemption permitting program that's available once per year. But if you're bringing your vehicles in a couple times a month, if it is something that you do regularly, if you are operating on a California public road, this applies to you. And your vehicle is over 14,000 pounds.
And
the next
quick,
question, oh,
just
sorry,
a
Dan.
quick add on to that, like as an example, we had a very, very large customer who I will not name, has thousands, many vehicles across this country, and wasn't able to determine, I don't know which vehicles are going to touch the state of California throughout a given year. I can't map that out for you. So I'm just going to pay a compliance fee and register all my vehicles with CARB so that I never run into any problems. Just as an example of how some larger fleets have had to navigate it.
And the next question is, if I get pulled over roadside, what does my driver actually need to show? Is there proof to carry, or is it all in the database?
So in most cases, it's just in the database. There are stickers and decals you can put on the side of the vehicle that, indicate compliance, but generally, roadside inspectors, from what we're told, and, CARB can share more information in the future, they have access to the back end to go ahead and do the VIN identification and see what vehicles are compliant or not.
And next question, if a truck fails a scan, how many days do I have to fix it and retest it before a DMV hold kicks in? Does the clock start at failure or the deadline?
At the deadline. So a failure is not an immediate fine or issue. You have that compliance window to play with, which is why we really advocate for, starting the scan early on so that if anything were to go wrong, you have time to resolve it. Yeah, there's no holes or anything until you're past your compliance deadline.
Okay.
And
That's
just a
great.
reminder, if you're using the Zonar solution, it starts 90 days. And so we're immediately sending that over. So you've got as much of that window as possible to get anything fixed if you need to.
And so those are the questions in the Q&A. I'm just going to jump to the chat to see if any questions are in there as well. And it looks like a couple are. What should we do if a vehicle is down for repairs several months during its CTC window?
So before that vehicle goes back in operation, you'll just want to make sure you have a pass in test. So I would log into the CARB CTC portal before you have to get back on the road and just see what compliance status exists for that vehicle. And this is that administrative step we were talking about, right? Check the compliance fee, check the latest status, the last scan status of the vehicle. I mean, that's what CARB is going to defer to.
And looks like there's a couple of questions back to back. Is the recording available? Yes, we will have this hosted both on our website. We're also sending an email to all of the registers to be able to get this recording. But we'll make sure that you have all of the information to be able to check back onto this. The next is it possible to get a CARB-based bullet list item to do like a to-do list of requirements?
Yeah, so just as in a list of requirements to prepare the vehicle for a scan, I would say there is a lot of good resources and information, FAQs posted on the CARB website you can review. In terms of a specific bullet list of preparing your vehicle, I would just say, making sure everything's operational, making sure there's no outstanding faults or check engine lights or anything happening that might indicate a possible fail scan. There's no set hard and fast steps outside of just maintaining good vehicle health that we could take, because CARB see a lot on the back end. They're reviewing a lot of information that we're also not privy to when they look at a back end scan. Rochelle, looks like you're gonna add to that.
I was just going to say that's actually a really great question and something that we probably should put together a blog on so that you've got a nice bulleted checklist there.
I was about to say, as the content lead, that just my answer to this is not yet, but I'll get back to you and I'll make sure it is timely and in the next couple of weeks so that you have a resource. The next question, and looks like the last one, does CARB have any waivers, exceptions, special programs for companies like ours that are not transport companies? I stated before, we're a small business, electrical power line contractor who uses equipment-mounted vehicles, crane trucks, digger derricks, bucket trucks that due to weight have been pulled into these requirements. These vehicles don't run constantly. A couple of these trucks, like our tractor trailers, have less than 100 hours of operation in a year. Our fleet is less than 8 equipment trucks. So would any of these vehicles be able to be waived, have an exception, special programs?
I would reach out to CARB directly about that. I will say that initially when this was rolled out, right, that were specifically targeted fleets, vehicles, and a lot of the construction equipment was supposed to come later because CARB are reviewing. There's a lot of complexities in that industry, right? Clean Truck Check, what we're talking about today, is based very, very heavily on the OBD port and the OBD compliance and the protocols associated with that. When you go into construction, there's, standardization there is extremely complicated, and CARB are not going to, jump into enforcement without making sure there's a good, clear, clean way to work with the OEMs to go ahead and make sure that stuff can be monitored and the correct data can be pulled off of those vehicles in an efficient way. So more to come on it. And I think that's something we can also build some content on in the future when we hear more with CARB in our conversations with them. But I know that's something that they're looking at very closely to roll out at a slower rate in the future, and to bring those off-highway vehicles into this, even though this blanket regulation applies to all. But yes, more to come. But great question.
And echoing what Tehan said, definitely reach out to CARB. But what I'll say is, I remember reading in the CARB FAQs that there's a no low use exemption for the Clean Truck Check right now. So once again, building on what Tehan said, right now, no, but definitely have the conversation with CARB.
Great. Well, both to our presenters and to everyone here today, thank you so much for joining us. This is an ongoing thing, and we want to make sure that we're giving you all of the information you need. So we'll follow up, as mentioned before, with the recording and some additional resources that we've provided, and we'll start working on some more that will be helpful. If you do have any more questions, please contact us at Zonar. We are always ready to have these conversations and to help specifically your fleets and what you need to be able to move forward with all of these changes. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Appreciate it. Take care.